Welcome everyone to the Ways and Means Committee. Today is Thursday, February 4th. We are having tax bills today, gaming bills, as well as one economic development bill. We are starting with the tax bills in order to accommodate the governor's staff on the administration bill, which is House Bill 612. We are joined today by a few people from the Economic Matters Committee, since this is jointly assigned. And that includes, as my documents come up, sorry about that, we have Delegates Arentz, Carey, and the Vice Chair, Delegate Dumais. We are also joined today by Senator Gazzoni in an unusual move. While we are discussing the House bill today, the Senate has already passed, is that correct? Senator, no, they're still working on, but they're close to passing the Senate version of the bill. And
third reader tomorrow.
And then as soon as they pass it, it will be assigned to our committee, and we will be taking up the vote on the Senate version of the bill next week with our amendments. So Senator Gazzoni is here today after the governor's after the governor's office speaks. We will then hear from Senator Gazzoni about the changes made in the Senate. And to members, this is a way to speed up the process, and it will be explained by the governor's office as well as by the senator. We need this bill pretty much to pass before February 14th to accommodate state tax filing and things that the comptroller's office does. And then of course, we're interested in any relief from this bill getting in the hands of Marylanders as quickly as possible. So I just want to explain the different process in this case. I do want to double check who is the key speaker from the governor's office. Will that be Ms. Keene?
Yes.
Ms. Keene, it's delightful to have you today. And I've already texted with the chief legislative officer, Kiefer Mitchell, who forgot that he's no longer a teenager. And in playing football in the snow yesterday with his son and friends, he broke a rib. So hopefully we will, hello to Mr. Mitchell, who I know is watching today avidly, and we want to all wish him well in his healing and remind him that he's no longer 18.
Yes.
Ms. Keene, please go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's a little suspect Kiefer broke his rib right before this hearing. I think he just didn't want to answer Delegate Lukey's question. So that's why I'm here today. But it's great to see all of you, Chair Kaiser, Vice Chair Washington, and members of the House Ways and Means and Economic Matters Committee. For the record, my name is Allie Keene, and I'm here on behalf of the Governor's Legislative Office in support of House Bill 612. Before I started, I wanted to note that I do have Secretary Robinson with me, Secretary Schultz, and then also Mark Nicole. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused devastating economic hardships for many struggling Marylanders and small businesses. This is why, for the 2021 legislative session, the governor's top priority is the Recovery for the Economy, Livelihoods, Industries, Entrepreneurs, and Families Act, or the Relief Act. As the title states, the governor's target for this bill was families, businesses, and unemployed Marylanders. The governor's aim in this legislation and the directive he gave to us in creating this proposal was that he wanted to provide relief for Maryland families and businesses that was both immediate and easy to receive. One great example of that in House Bill 612 is a direct stimulus payment for low to moderate income Marylanders utilizing the already existing Earned Income Tax Credit. This relief begins with immediate payments of $500 for families and $300 for individuals who filed for the Earned Income Tax Credit during tax year 19. This is followed by a second round stimulus for EITC filers in tax year 20 that would provide an additional $250 for eligible families and $150 for individuals. This is similar to how the federal stimulus payments would work, where there is no application necessary. The Earned Income Tax Credit has been proven to have direct and immediate impact on hardworking Marylanders, and this enhanced stimulus would provide much needed relief to over 400,000 Marylanders who have been disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you for your time this afternoon. And I'm now going to turn it over to Secretary Robinson.
Secretary Robinson, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, and good afternoon, Chair Kaiser, and Vice Chairs Washington and Dumais, and members of the committees. For the record, my name is Tiffany Robinson. I'm the Secretary at the Maryland Department of Labor, and I'm very proud to join the administration today to testify in support of Governor Hogan's Relief Act of 2021. As you've already heard, this emergency legislative package will provide critical funding, financial support, and tax relief to unemployed Marylanders who have lost their jobs, and to small businesses that are struggling due to the COVID-19 pandemic. During this public health and economic crisis, our department has received over 1.4 million new unemployment insurance claims and has paid over $9.4 billion in benefits. We have also provided $31 million in grant funding to 822 small businesses in all 24 Maryland jurisdictions, saving 12,736 jobs through our layoff aversion grant funding program. This relief package provides further financial assistance to the hundreds of thousands of unemployment insurance claimants that have been determined eligible to receive benefits by repealing all state and local income tax on the benefit payments they have received for calendar year 2020 and beyond. This means that many claimants will see a refund from any state and local unemployment tax that they elected to be withheld from their benefits in 2020. And it also means that more of these benefits will go directly into the pockets of unemployed Marylanders who need it most in the future. The relief package also provides unemployment tax relief for small businesses by codifying and extending an executive order that the governor issued back in December that waives the charging of COVID-19 unemployment insurance benefits to employers. This prevents Maryland's contributory employers from having their experience rating negatively impacted due to the pandemic. It specifically prevents these employers from being held financially responsible because they had to lay off or furlough employees through no fault of their own due to the economic consequences of the pandemic. By calculating tax rates based on their pre-pandemic experience, employers' 2021 and 2022 tax rates will be significantly reduced from what they otherwise would have been without the executive order and this legislation. I also wanted to mention that we've introduced a technical amendment that ensures we will have the authority to assign the lowest of the two tax rates to any employer that may, for any reason, have a lower calculated rate without this waiver of charges. We also provided flexibility in that amendment for the calculation of charges to any employer that may fail to respond to requests for information from the department, which would delay these calculations. And with that, I strongly urge the committee to vote favorably for the Relief Act of 2021, because the passage of this emergency legislation is not only critical to the livelihood of our state's unemployment insurance claimants, but also for the longevity and stability of our state's small business community. I thank you for your time. And I'm now going to switch places and turn it over to Secretary Schultz, who's going to provide additional information and details about the remainder of this important legislation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Robinson.
Madam Secretary, wonderful to see you today.
Good afternoon. It's wonderful to see you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the Vice Chairs and to all of the committee members, and I guess special acknowledgement to Chair Gazzone and being able to make sure that we've got everybody involved in this conversation. For the record, I'm Kelly Schultz, Secretary of the Maryland Department of Commerce, here in support of House Bill 612. From the very start of this pandemic, Governor Hogan has been committed to providing relief for Marylanders and Maryland businesses, and to keeping our economy strong until COVID-19 is behind us once and for all. So far, this administration has provided over $700 million in coronavirus relief funding, with business assistance that has included $220 million in emergency grant and loan assistance for small businesses. With that, $75 million in loans now converted to grants, so those businesses are not burdened with debt during their uncertain period. We provided $5 million to support manufacturers so that they could begin or accelerate production of personal protective equipment very early in the pandemic. We provided $10 million for additional loans to economically disadvantaged businesses through our Miss BIDFA program. Commerce also provided $80 million in restaurant relief and $50 million in hotel relief. Those funds are currently provided to the local jurisdictions for disbursement. Governor Hogan also provided $30 million for the layoff aversion fund administered by the Department of Labor, which helped businesses ensure employees could telework and helped cover the costs of additional cleaning and sanitation measures businesses might need to stay open. He also provided $20 million in relief for Main Street, Maryland communities through the Department of Housing and Community Development. Additionally, the governor provided $47 million for nonprofits and $7 million in funding for arts and arts organizations through the Maryland State Arts Council. But as we know, the pandemic has dragged on and it isn't enough. Many businesses have had to close. Thousands of Marylanders are still out of work. Marylanders, quite frankly, need more relief, and House Bill 612 can provide it. I want to specifically address a couple of important provisions in the bill for our business community. First is the sales tax relief for small businesses. This will allow more than 55,000 small businesses in the state to take that money and apply it directly to payroll and other essential operations costs. This will help businesses keep the doors open and the lights on. It will help their employees pay their bills, put food on their tables, and care for their families. Furthermore, the more we can do to keep businesses afloat during this very difficult time, the less ground Maryland will have to make up as the pandemic subsides and the economy continues to recover. It is far better for the state to forego some tax revenue now than to ask businesses and entrepreneurs to start over from scratch if their businesses shut down. Next, I want to mention the protection for businesses who received grants or loans from the state. Governor Hogan announced last month that Maryland would forgive the $75 million in small business emergency relief loans. Since those are now grants, Senate Bill 486 or House Bill 612 would prevent those businesses from seeing their taxes increase as a result. The goal of our grant program was for the money to go to the businesses for their needs, not for the money to come back to the state through taxes. That was not our purpose. This bill will make sure businesses keep their relief funds as we intended. A related provision in this bill will make a change to our MSBIDFA program that will allow forgiveness of the COVID-19 emergency loans provided by that entity so they can also be converted to loans. As I noted a moment ago, Governor Hogan provided $10 million to MSBIDFA for additional loans to businesses impacted by the pandemic, and he would like to extend them the same forgiveness that other loan applicants were granted. However, in order to do so, we required a change to our statute, which is included in this bill. We believe the provisions of this bill will not only provide relief to our business community in the short term, but will help us lay the groundwork for a smoother and faster recovery period when we can finally put this pandemic behind us. Madam Chair, we respectfully request a favorable report on this very important piece of legislation. Thank you.
And Madam Chair, before we get into questions, I would just like to publicly acknowledge and thank the Senate for their quick action on the Relief Act and also extend that to the House. You have been very cooperative and we certainly appreciate that.
Certainly. Now, is the someone from DBM speaking as well?
Mark is here. He will not be speaking. He is for question purposes.
Okay, thank you so very much. So after this panel and any set of questions, we will move on to Senator Gazzoni. Any questions for Ms. Keene or any of our secretaries? Wow, excellent. Well, I would direct all the members to the chat. In the chat, I put the third reader version of the Senate version of this bill, and pointing out to you that the Senate essentially made not a single amendment to any part of the bill that the governor's office presented. They merely added a new section, which is 12 pages of the bill, which details an additional $520 million. But they did not change any of the initiatives from the governor's office. Would that be accurate, Allie?
Yes, they didn't change any of the governor's provisions.
Yes, I just wanted to point that out to everyone to look not there, but starting on page 8. But Delegate Feldmark does have a question for you, Ms. King.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the testimony and for this bill. My question actually is for Secretary Robinson, I believe, in terms of the taxation or the tax relief for unemployment benefits. How would that relief translate to individuals who are still waiting for their unemployment benefits?
So obviously this is an exemption, a proposed exemption to our income tax laws.
Right.
So as determinations are made on any claims, it would apply to all of those claimants. Currently, we are required by law to allow our claimants, when they file a claim, to ask our department to withhold taxes for them. We send files weekly to the comptroller's office to collect those taxes. So this, on any claim going forward that has had taxes withheld, they would be entitled to a refund, and on any, as determinations are made, whenever those may be made. And going forward, any new claims that will be filed, obviously, would, if this bill passes, would not have the requirement to have those state and local taxes withheld.
Okay, and so would that apply to claims that have not been processed yet? If the claim was made before this legislation passes, but hasn't yet been paid, how will it impact those?
All relates to the time frame of their eligibility in the program. So likely, if a claimant has already filed, their eligible period, if they are determined to be eligible, will be, in the past months when the law would have allowed them to elect to withhold. So depending on the timing of that determination, maybe we can proactively find a way to not even send the taxes, and they will be able to be awarded full benefits from us without the tax withholding. Depending on the timing of this bill package and the implementation of it, if there was a withholding, then they would get a refund when that is processed through the comptroller's office.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Delegate Feldmark. I'm sure others were considering that as well. So excellent question. Any other questions for Ms. Keene and our secretaries? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to Senator Gazzoni, who I now unfortunately do not see on the Zoom.
Madam Chair, his computer froze and I think he's restarting it.
Aha. Well, I don't know if maybe the Senate President wants to jump in, who's texting with me now and commenting on this hearing. So, but we will. We do have one more person to testify. So we may as well take that to not let anyone wait further. Let me just double check the waiting room again. All right, he's not there. Is there a Mr. Blank on the in the Zoom?
Yes, I am here, Madam Chair.
All right, if you'd like to testify, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair Kaiser, Vice Chair Washington, and members of the committee. My name is Pablo Blanc. I am the Director of Immigrant Integration with CASA, the largest immigrant rights organization in Maryland. We represent over 100,000 Black and Brown immigrants and working families. While CASA is in strong support of getting much needed relief to Maryland families who have been impacted by the pandemic, we are deeply concerned that the Relief Act doesn't include undocumented taxpayers such as Norma. Norma is a proud Marylander as us. She has been living here for over 10 years and has paid the state income tax all those years with an ITIN number. Norma got infected with COVID and spent a month isolated at home. After recovery, she realized the restaurant she had worked for 8 years had closed forever. At that time, she confronted the economic damage COVID causes. She searched for a job for months, but it wasn't easy because she needed to stay home to support the education of her 2 kids as well, who were doing virtual classes. Her persistence landed a job for her doing food delivery at night. She doesn't get any salary from the restaurant. She only gets the tips that clients pay, but at least she can afford some food for her family after paying the expenses of her car. Norma's husband was also COVID positive. After his recovery, His employer refused to hire him again. He recently got a part-time job. We asked the committee to amend the bill to include all Marylanders who meet the same income requirements in alignment with the EITC. Also submitted to the committee is a letter signed by over 60 organizations across Maryland who have signed on in support of amending the bill to include all residents in need. Members of the committee, as you work on finalizing this bill, please remember the thousands of Marylanders like Norma, whom you also represent here. The COVID virus doesn't discriminate. It affects all Marylanders, regardless if they pay with taxes with an ITIN or a social security number. Please pass the Relief Act including immigrant families. Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Blank? All right, thank you, sir. Thank you for joining us today. Senator Gazzoni, I hear you're here on somebody else's computer. There you are. Senator Gazzoni, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not Matt Bennett, but I'll do as good as I can as he would. So I think I heard you say before I had the little breakdown that the Senate, in fact, has agreed to all the provisions that were in the governor's bill. And as I think I mentioned at the beginning, we are in fact taking this up on third reader tomorrow. It came out of the Budget and Tax Committee unanimously. We had a series of amendments and then a few on the floor, all essentially committee amendments that moved us forward. So let me just quickly say how we began thinking about what we wanted to do with this legislation. And as we all know, and has been described by the members of the governor's team, a lot has happened in the last year. There was the big CARES bill. There was $250 million that was taken out of the rainy day fund by the governor and put into a number of programs. There was the new stimulus, a smaller version that was passed. And now we're expecting hopefully another stimulus program from the Biden administration. So how do you make sense of all of that, all that activity, and ensure that you're giving relief and supports to the people who really need it? The answer is it's very complicated. And I'm sure that your committee and the other committees in the House have struggled with this. We're dealing with imperfect information, but as representatives who are out in their communities know that there are people who are hurting. There are businesses who are hurting. So basically we charted out all the relief packages that have been presented over the year, the dollar amounts that went to each of them. And then went systematically through that and determined whether or not we thought there had been enough provided. And in addition, we went through and looked at, as I'm sure you and on your side also have done, we've had multiple committees over the session, over the interim, working on various programs to look at what relief looks like, what does the future look like, what do we need, where do we need to invest? And so we took all that information and put it together, and then made also the obvious question, what can we even afford? And how can we come up with any kind of resources to assist our citizens and all Marylanders? So again, we were looking to be comprehensive, and we were looking to be fast with money out the door. And the reality is that I'm sure you all recognize that we have essentially 4 months with this program that we are presenting. 4 months because we have focused on simply looking at the 21 budget and what kind of resources can we use from the 21 budget, what resources are out there. And basically we concluded that we could come up with about $520 million. Now, how did we do that? We took $320 million from the rainy day fund, which brought us down to a 3% level. We took $100 million from the local income tax reserve fund, which is a fairly standard procedure that we've done in downturns for many years. And we also took $100 million from the Blueprint Fund, which I'm happy to discuss in more detail, but know that even in that process, we knew that that $100 million had to specifically go to education and only to education. So that's the $520 million. So how do we pay for that? We pay for that, well, first off, how do we restore the rainy day fund? And now I guess that's probably the biggest concern that we had. We think we're using the rainy day fund in a way that it's probably the best way it could ever be used, on a short-term basis, on a cash flow basis, to ensure that we get money out the door as quickly as possible. And so for that $320 million of the $520 million, the rainy day money, we use $170 million from the Medicaid match, the extended match program. Now, of course, we were very fortunate to have that during the last year, and we were also fortunate outside of stimulus that the Biden administration was able to extend that program all the way into December. It generates well over $300 million for us. We decided that we would take about half of that, $170 million, to replenish the rainy day fund. The second thing was that, and something that we've also done many times before, in this case using FY21 and FY22 components, $75 million each, total $150 million of money that was to go to as a supplemental payment to the retirement system. And just so no one is concerned about that, this is money that we sort of hold out there every year. And if things are good, we add it to the retirement system, but it in no way taking or using this money affects the actuarially soundness of the payments that are required to be made every year. So all that together, 320 backs up the rainy day, we're back up to 5%, and we have a total then of $520 million. So looking back at our chart and making the analysis of all the things that have been done and what more can be done, we came up again with a number of things that are both, some are new that haven't been touched upon, and others that fit right into programs that the state has already been involved with. So if you'd like, there's about 30 of them. I don't know if you want me to go through it all.
Hit the highlights, maybe?
What's that?
Hit the highlights.
Yeah, so just as an example, something that's new. As you may recall, in a previous plan, the governor increased a $100 payment for those who receive temporary cash assistance. Great program, great decision from our perspective. But there's another program, Temporary Disability Assistance Program, TDAP, that somehow didn't get the same treatment. We believe that they should get the same treatment. There's an interesting situation where their enrollment dropped dramatically. And it dropped dramatically, we believe, because it requires you to go to the doctor. And during COVID, people weren't going to the doctor. And so there are a lot of poor individuals with disabilities out there who weren't receiving any benefits at all. We want to get those people back on the rolls, and we want to make sure that they get that additional $100 a month that that is similar to the TCA program. Money for food banks, money for reopening developmentally disabled programs, some nonprofit dollars, restaurant relief. Here's an interesting one, the Emergency Grant and Loan Program. As you know, in the governor's package, he has that program where individuals who are collecting sales tax don't have to remit at a certain level. Well, it's been pointed out that there are many businesses out there that don't collect sales tax. And what about them? So we created a program so that they may also be eligible for that. We also, with what I think a lot of clarity and throughout the program, and this is the first example of it, decided to make money set aside for disadvantaged businesses. And the way we were able to accomplish that, and for those of you who've ever been part of that discussion know it's complicated and requires a study to do some of the passing on of money. But the bottom line is through the VLT program, there are 8 fund managers out there that provide support to businesses across the state. And so for disadvantaged businesses. So we have in that case, and the one that I just described with the people who don't collect sales tax, we're using a 15% set aside for that. For restaurant relief, again, 15% set aside of some of the money. We also have expanded the Miss Bits program that I heard the secretary speak of, more at $10 million. We tackled the question of individuals who have been stuck in adjudication on UI cases. So there's about 40,000 people who are currently in that situation. And the conclusion we came to is that we certainly didn't want to provide any benefits to fraudulent applications. The department has flagged those that they believe or have some sense that may be fraudulent. So those have been taken off the table. But then for those who are trapped for over 30 days in an adjudication process, we wanted to make sure that they got something. Even though they couldn't get federal dollars right now through a federal program, we created a $1,000 per person grant program that would go to those individuals. It would be for the next 4 months. Every month, it will be determined who is on that list. You don't double dip, but people can come and go within that process, and the most that you could get would be a $1,000 grant. We've added caseworkers. I know all of us and our staffs have had to deal with those issues, $3 million for that. We have some component money for transportation, for MTA, highways, commuter buses. The commuter bus is interesting because it kind of gets to some of the problems that we have, I think, consistently face when we're dealing with any businesses. The commuter buses are, of course, the routes that are private companies that the state contracts with to provide commuter bus service. Well, those individuals spend a lot of money, buy buses when they get the contracts, and then the routes were cut in half. And those are fixed costs. And covering those fixed costs is a serious problem for a business like that. So it's an example of the kind of sort of ongoing issue that many businesses are facing about their fixed costs and whether or not we can assist with that. High on the priority list is mental health services, $20 million to community mental health facilities that provide crisis services. If there ever was a time that we should be focusing more of our resources to that, I believe it is now. There are well over 100 of these facilities around the state, but they have been overwhelmed and they need support, and they need support so they can support Marylanders, as I said, all across the state. You might have heard, and I don't know who has the bill on your side, but the Health Enterprise Zone, which is the Hayes bill on our side, which of course is about health disparities. Again, another significant issue in our minds that again, at this point in time, if we can't really work on these issues and solve these issues, then we're really not doing our job. We have put forth $14 million to get that program moving. Some money for vaccines, for outreach and training in the community. We obviously know what's going on and the problems associated with that. A lot of it is communication problem. Matter of fact, I heard Lukey talk about that last night, that it is a real communication problem for Marylanders. There's additional money in there for beefing up our well-mobiles, which of course, hopefully that can reach hard to reach communities to help get vaccines everywhere. There is money for housing support. It's actually a small amount. This is one of those ones where we're looking very closely at what the other agencies and what the Fed has done in the last go around. They've decided to put forth $402 million to help with emergency housing and with assistance for individuals who are having a hard time with the rent, $25 million to assist with that. Also, and equally as important right now, and I think we have a number of bills throughout the legislature dealing with civil right to counsel, the desperate need to have individuals who are going to eviction, and quite frankly, beyond that, and lots of other issues, but in this case, eviction, but $3 million to Maryland Legal Aid to help individuals go through the process. And then finally, to the education program, as I mentioned before, the money specifically taken from the blueprint, but specifically for education, $50 million for summer school and tutoring for the most individuals and the students who most need that assistance, and then resources to local governments to safely accelerate in-person education, another $50 million. Some money for community colleges, juvenile services, and that wraps it up. I guess I did do most of them, but we do believe it's comprehensive. We do believe that it reaches to Marylanders who have been hurting, and we do believe that it will provide additional assistance. We believe the governor's bill is a good one, and we believe that this only adds to that. Finally, just as a note, just so you know, at the very end of the book, we specify that this money should be distributed proportionally where possible by population across the state. We want it to go to every part of our state. We want to also note that when federal funds may become available, that the federal funds should be spent instead of these funds. So certainly there could be situations, and if you look at some of the proposals out there, federal funds would in fact be well enough to supplant what we're doing in this, and that's fine. It'll give us money in the future for other endeavors as we move forth, and we begin, of course, dealing with the 22 budget. And then finally, that we put in a reporting requirement that every 2 weeks, the administration on each of these programs is to report how much money has been spent and who, to the degree practicable, the money has been spent on. And I think that is it, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, as I was first muted. I see that we have questions, and I know that you have staff there as well in case any of the technical questions, but we'll start with Delegate Ivey.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much, Senator, for all the work that you've been doing on this important piece of legislation. My question really is just piggybacking off of the gentleman representing CASA to ask if there was a provision put into the Senate bill that would actually allow for this relief to also get to the hands of undocumented members of our community.
I'll have to say that that would be something you're going to have to take up. It's not within the work that we've done. It's not something that I don't think there's any opposition to. It's just we were moving as quickly as possibly.
No.
And yeah, I missed this testimony, so I'm not even sure exactly what he was saying, but it's something that certainly we can have a discussion on.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Delegate. Delegate Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for that summary. I know everything's been moving very fast, so thank you for coming and joining us. I just wanted to make sure I was hearing correctly. There was about 50 million, I think, that you're thinking about for school reopening kind of supports. I don't know if I'm characterizing that correctly. I wanted to know kind of where that number came from, if you had any, way to kind of give some texture to that.
Yeah. I think the answer is it's jumpstart money, and that's the best that I can say. Again, 4 months trying to get out the door, knowing federal help may likely be coming. So it's really jumpstart money.
Anything else? Delegate Lasanti?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just have a quick question for you. And you've done a comprehensive job of looking at all the very, very needy people in the state and trying to fill those gaps. One issue that has come up over and over again is the people that really fall in the gaps that don't qualify for either the stimulus check. They don't own a business. They are basically self-sufficient individuals who have tucked away money in a retirement savings and have had to tap into that to be able to sustain themselves because they have lost their job and for one reason or another didn't qualify for unemployment because their job basically went away. So the state has a mandatory 20% tax on early withdrawal from those tax deferred savings that they have for their early retirement. So they're basically dipping into their own rainy day fund, if you will. And I was wondering if there's been any consideration of that issue.
We really didn't do too much on the tax side. Our focus was, as you can see on the spending side, I think it was mostly, and we chose to do that mostly because we looked at it as the fastest way to get money into people's hands. But, I think happy to have those kinds of discussions with you and the committee.
All right. Thank you, Delegate Lasanti. All right. If there are no other questions, I want to thank Senator Gazzoni for joining us. Thank the Economic Matters Committee members who also joined us because of the provisions that are related to their committee. Thanking Allie and the governor's office, and Kiefer Mitchell did text me to say that he was very sad to be here to not be able to say please move favorably. So I'll share that on his behalf. And if there's nothing else, we are done with the hearing on this bill, and we will move to the next bill, which is Delegate Learman, House Bill 113.
Great.
We have 3 people here from Appropriations since it's jointly assigned. We have Delegates McKay, Proctor, and Acevero.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair, and hello, committee, Ways and Means Committee and appropriators. Nice to see you all today. We are going from how to spend the money with that bill to how to estimate how much money we have to spend with this bill. And I assure you that it is just as important that we know how much money we have to spend as it is how we want to spend it. So this bill is all about the Bureau of Revenue Estimates, which you may know sits within the Comptroller's office and interacts quite frequently with the Department of Budget and Management and the Treasurer and the Comptroller as well on the Board of Revenue Estimates. So this bill really recognizes the importance of having accurate estimates of our state revenue. I think many of us who perhaps weren't aware of how important that was became very aware of it over the past year. And this is really important, especially during volatile times. And this bill will do the job and do the work of enhancing the Bureau of Revenue Estimates and increasing its accountability, transparency, and its level of expertise. It makes several changes to the Bureau of Revenue Estimates, including changes to staffing and reporting requirements to the Bureau, makes it more transparent, and will help ensure that it's adequately staffed to assist the legislative and executive branches, and also to aid our local governments who really have a hard time in their revenue estimates without support and without adequate support from the states. I also want to note that we have a few sponsor amendments. We've been, this was a pre-filed bill. We wanted to get it in, but we were having ongoing conversations with the Comptroller's Office and with the Department of Budget and Management and the Treasurer. So there are several sponsor amendments. I think they are in your packets and were uploaded. If not, they are with the committee already. So we want to make sure that to bring your attention to those as well. So I won't go through the whole bill because it's a sort of litany of things, but in a nutshell, it modifies the process for selecting a chief analyst. It ensures that the BRE will submit its March report, which is a big one, to us prior to the passage of the budget bill. So ensure that we have the most up-to-date numbers available. It requires quadrennial reporting that analyzes the accuracy of reports and estimates, and it requires that type of reporting as well on the transparency and usability of the data and reports and analysis of the staffing needs of the agency. It also makes sure that we're making public reports available on not just the general fund, but on several very large special funds as well, some of which you're very familiar with, like the Blueprint for Maryland's Future Fund, the Education Trust Fund, and the Transportation Trust Fund. So, those special funds don't always get their own reporting, but they're big enough and important enough that I think that they should. And so we are also asking for the BRE to make public reporting available on its website, which it will create because of this bill as well. So, I hope that not only does this bill really provide for an expanded process to select an executive leader in the BRE, and Andy will talk a little bit about that, it also provides for increased accountability and transparency for really every Marylander. Any Marylander with access to the internet, and we have to make sure everybody does have that access, will be able to follow the Board of Estimate meetings online, watch archive videos, and much more without having to reach out to the agency to gather the information that they're seeking. This immediate and easy access will save the Bureau and citizens time, money, and effort, and will position the Bureau and the board to be more effective in assisting the governor and the legislature, as well as local governments, in estimating revenues on which our budgets and the bill that you just heard are based. So I ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Learman. Any questions for Delegate Learman? Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Delegate, so I love the bill, and it's the rare bill that has extensive favorable testimony in the floor system, which is fantastic. I did want to give you a chance to respond. There was one favorable with amendments testimony, which, if that's the worst testimony you get, that's a good thing, from DBM. And what they're saying is that it's unusual for the classification or salary of an employee of the state to be set through statute. So do you want to respond to that concern? Well,
sure. Thank you for that. And actually, that's one of the things that we were working with them and the Comptroller's Office on. So one of the amendments addresses that, and it just it strikes where the deputy chief shall be a member of the executive pay plan and the chief. So it just leaves more. That's too detailed, basically, and too prescriptive. So it leaves that up for future negotiations. Thanks.
Gotcha. Great bill. Thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions for Delegate Learman? All right. Again, and from our 3 appropriations members as well. All right. Thank you, Delegate, very much. We do have a few people testifying. We'll start with Mr. Andy Shoffley. Welcome back to this government service.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very pleased to be back in public service. Thrilled to be back. Members of the committee, I appreciate you hearing the bill, and I can't thank Delegate Learman enough for her leadership on this issue, as well as Delegate Corman and Senator McCray over in the Senate. Very appreciative. For the record, I'm Andy Schoffel. I'm the Chief of the Bureau of Revenue Estimates and the Executive Secretary for the Board of Revenue Estimates. In these positions, I lead the state's revenue estimating program. Our revenue estimating program is carefully crafted in the statute, and that's a very important fact. It's designed to ensure excellent estimates, well, as excellent as they can be, of course, but also to remove politics from the process. We are frequently praised by outsiders, including the rating agencies, for our work products, our candor, and our lack of politics. My office does many other related functions, including responding to more than 300 fiscal notes, both on behalf of the Comptroller's Office and also on legislation that doesn't affect the Comptroller's Office, but legislation that we might have input in helping DLS with the fiscal estimates. We do this currently with myself at the helm, and I have 4 analysts that work directly for me. While the structure is sound, the requirements of the job have changed significantly over the years. In my time here, a little over 10 years, we've been through the Great Recession, the fiscal cliff, 3 major federal tax rewrites, several major state tax rewrites, and now COVID-19. BRE has embraced the Comptroller's data warehouse. We use it regularly to better inform policy proposals and revenue estimates. This actually creates tremendously more work. Back before the data warehouse, the answer was, we don't know. But now we do. But it takes a lot of work to get to those answers. So actually, this increase in our information has greatly increased the responsibilities of my division. And our strength is our staff. My staff must be proficient in all of the following fields and skills: economics, statistics, IT programming, including the languages of SQL, SAS, and Python, tax law, and tax administration. No individuals outside of BRE, save a few DLS analysts, possess these skills upon hire. We invest considerable amounts of time and training in our employees. Typically, it takes 1.5 years before we start to get a return on that investment. However, these are also the most sought after skills in the labor market, and we have a history of not being able to retain our talent. This bill will help me to retain the talent and not further degrade BRE when we do lose an analyst. Right now, when I lose an analyst, I lose 25% of my workforce. That work has to be spread across the other analysts and myself, jeopardizing future turnover. This bill supports retention and allows for a career path in BRE. It enables me to better compete in the labor market. It improves the chances that should I ever change position again, there will be a prepared individual to step in. Because at this level, the other skill other than management is effective communication, the ability to explain complex technical concepts to general audiences. This is a very rare skill, but it's critical in BRE. And as the delegate noted, there are many other excellent provisions in this. I can't cheer enough on the aspects of transparency. The creation of BRE's own website. And I don't mean this as a hit at all in the Comptroller's Office, but BRE is a small component of the Comptroller's Office, and the majority of traffic there is headed there for tax purposes. It's kind of hard to find our information. Breaking us out into our own website will absolutely increase our ability to interact with the public. We'll be able to put up more data more frequently in support of local governments. We'll be able to better opine on current revenue issues and current economic issues that we will intend to get to you as the audience, so you're getting more regular updates on what we're seeing and what we're thinking at the moment, not just those 3 times a year when we do revenue estimates. There are several other provisions in there. I'm supportive of every one of them. I've seen the amendments that strike the salaries for myself and the future deputy, and I am supportive of that as well. From the Board of Revenue Estimates, I do have support to get those positions going at the salary levels that they need to be. So I do feel that this bill greatly positions the Bureau and the Board of Revenue Estimates to move forward, both for better estimates for you as well as transparency for the public. So thank you, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shoffley, and again, glad to have you back. We next have Justin Fiore from the Maryland Municipal League.
I am here. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and Timey McTimer face. For the record, my name is Justin Fiore, and I'm here on behalf of the Maryland Municipal League. We are happy to share our support for House Bill 113. As many of you know, in the prior proponents testified to, municipalities really rely on the Board of Revenue Estimates, revenue forecasting to help in their annual budgeting process. We believe that an expansion of BRE staffing capabilities will lead to more and better data and better reports, in particular with shared state shared revenue, looking at income tax, the Transportation Trust Fund, and program open space. As you can imagine, our office got a lot of calls from members concerned about how to address their budgets in the middle of the pandemic amidst declining revenue. And we connected them with experts at BRE who were able to help with certain projections. This is a great working relationship and one that benefits our shared constituents. We believe that would only be strengthened under this legislation, and so we respectfully request a favorable report on House Bill 113. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fiore. I'm going to take the next few witnesses. Give me a second. We're going to take Kaylee Shumitz, and then I'm going to hand the reins over to Delegate Lukey for a few minutes.
Thank you, Chair Kaiser, members of the committee. My name is Callie Shumitz. I'm Director of Communications and Partner Engagement with the Maryland Center on Economic Policy. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan research and policy organization. So we work on a number of issue areas, but one of our core areas of focus is helping people better understand how state fiscal policy choices affect them and their families. But Maryland's budget should be the clearest reflection of our values and priorities as a state. So a transparent and open budget process is critical to ensuring that state spending reflects Marylanders' priorities. So we think that increasing transparency around state revenue forecasting and reporting as outlined in House Bill 113 builds on other recent budget process reforms that the legislature has supported in recent years. We're supportive of all of the components of this bill that Delegate Learman outlined. We think this just makes good common sense. I'm going to mostly focus on the transparency pieces. I know it's a very small step, but just there's language in the bill ensuring adequate notice and access to Board of Revenue Estimates meetings, which is really important just to ensure that interested parties can watch the meetings and access the related information. The fiscal forecasts that the Bureau creates and the board reviews and approves are really critical to understanding the state's fiscal health and informing policy decisions about state spending and revenue. So we think it's important to increase transparency and accessibility of the Bureau's reports. And we definitely think some of the largest areas of state investment, education and transportation, rely heavily on special funds. So increased transparency around the health of those funds is also makes sense and is really important. And finally, we just echo what others have said, that the state's revenue estimates are only as good as the people producing them. So we definitely agree that it makes sense to ensure there are adequate staff in the Bureau of Revenue Estimates and that the compensation levels are appropriate to attract experienced and skilled analysts. So we would ask for a favorable report on House Bill 113.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shumitz. Any questions for Ms. Shumitz? Not seeing any. Next up, we have Mr. Kevin Canale on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Kevin Canale here on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties in support of House Bill 113. You have my written testimony. I think Delegate Learman and the witnesses that came before me did an excellent job of explaining the benefits of this bill. But from a county government perspective, we are very excited that this bill will definitely boost the capacity of the BRE to provide counties with comprehensive, timely, and accurate data on state and local revenues, fiscal analyses, and economic trends. Counties rely on this data from the BRE to craft budgets and make informed policy decisions. And I'll say that when I first spoke with Andy about this bill, I was really encouraged to hear about the website and the fact that the BRE would be able to provide hyper-local data and economic trends. And we believe that that's going to streamline public access and better equip local elected officials to provide that high-quality county-specific data to their constituents and their local businesses. Our local finance professionals, our budget and finance officers, have a fantastic working relationship with the BRE, and we believe that this bill is just going to strengthen counties in developing and implementing local fiscal policies designed to serve and react to community needs. So with that, we love this bill, and we'd ask for a favorable report on House Bill 113.
Thank you so much, Mr. Canale. just want to see, are there any questions for any of the four who have spoken about this bill? All right, thank you, Delegate Learman. Thank you to three members from Appropriations who joined us listening in. And we're ready for the next bill. Delegate Smith, House Bill 435. Another non-controversial bill.
You know, we're keeping it light. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I'd like to say hello to all of my colleagues on Ways and Means. For the record, my name is Delegate Stephanie Smith, and I am coming before you presenting House Bill 435. And this bill may seem a bit familiar because I discussed a separate bill that was reviewing a more comprehensive overview of how we can make our entire tax code more fair, just, and progressive. But I thought to myself, perhaps maybe an appetite for something a little more discreet that would also yield significant funding opportunities for the many needs we have in our state. So House Bill 435 aims to increase the state income tax rate only for individuals and households with taxable income in excess of $1 million. So currently, those households pay a tax rate of 5.75%. So that means if a household has 250,000, 450,000, 1 million, they're all paying 5.75%. This bill, House Bill 435, at $1 million and $1 would establish a new tax rate effective at the end of 2021 of 7%. Now, the last time I was before you on a similar bill, I did not have the distinguished and historic U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen to quote from her recent testimony before the Senate Finance Committee, where she said there is broad agreement that higher taxes on wealthy families can raise substantial amounts of revenue, make the tax code more progressive. And in light, this is where I'm coming in, that was the end of Yellen's quote. In light of the ongoing needs to better support our obligations and unforeseen entitlement needs in the wake of COVID-19, Maryland should seriously consider addressing tax unfairness. Targeted income tax hikes for high-income residents can allow Maryland lawmakers, us, who have been entrusted with the fiscal stewardship of the state, to pursue important goals for the state to address, such as statewide Wi-Fi challenges, improving infrastructure, addressing racial inequities, and promoting economic inclusion. As we all have been dealing with over 400 years of unresolved issues related to racial equity and justice that have continued to yield year after year economic inequities. And this tax situation is no different. The bottom 20% of Marylanders pay in excess on average of 9.7% of their take-home pay in state and federal taxes. We're talking about people making $24,000 or less. That's why I want to direct your attention to folks making on average $1.6 million in Maryland who are paying a far smaller proportion of their around just over 6% on state and local taxes. So I think that we have our work cut out for us because this pandemic has not only exposed longstanding inequities, it has deepened them. And while the pandemic economy has adversely impacted the lowest compensated workers the most, the wealthiest households have only become richer. This is what a K-shaped economy looks like. And Maryland has a responsibility to institute tax fairness and fiscal relief to Maryland's tax landscape. And this is one single discrete and specific measure we can take to meet the moment and improve our collective fiscal resiliency for future challenges. So for the following reasons, I respectfully request your support for House Bill 435. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Smith, and thank you for a very concise explanation of your bill. I believe Delegate Buckle has a question just to confirm his support for this issue, of course.
Always happy to talk to him.
Thank you. It's great to see you, Delegate Smith, again. But you know, a very, very famous person of the 20th century named Karl Marx said that history repeats itself first as tragedy and then as farce. And I say that because I wasn't around and in the legislature in 2008, the last time Maryland passed a millionaire's tax, but I looked at some of the information contained in the testimony, and it seems that, strangely enough, we did this 13 years ago, also in the middle of a vast economic recession, or timed right around. I think the bill was actually passed right before the recession really hit at its full point. We passed a bill with a millionaire's tax in Maryland, actually a little less of a percentage than what you're proposing, 6.25 instead of 7. our friends at DLS estimated that we would raise $106 million in additional revenue for all these worthy endeavors that we would all love to fund. And now that we actually dropped by $257 million in revenue from the $1 million and up filing class. And given that your proposal would have us again right in the middle of a pandemic where a lot of people, a lot of businesses, a lot of wealthy people have lost money, have lost opportunities and business costs. Do you not think that there's a real chance that in fact we won't generate any new revenue from this, and that we'll simply maybe even lose revenue given the history of these types of proposals?
I really appreciate that question, as I appreciate all questions from you, Delegate Buckle. But I actually do not have that fear for a couple of key reasons. As you may know, I graduated from law school in 2009. At the height,
That was your first mistake.
you know what? Things happen, you know. And we make plans, God laughs, right? So I know all too acutely that in addition to factory workers and a lot of blue collar, workers that, make cars and things like that, that were losing jobs during the Great Recession of the early 2000s. There were a lot of white collar jobs, particularly in the legal profession and the like, that also went away. We know financial services and that and whatnot. But this particular financial challenge is actually not really as widespread in terms of the pain. One of the reasons why Maryland's state coffers are doing a bit better than even theorized about a year ago is because so many of our white collar workers are able to work remotely, continue to earn money, and keep paying their taxes. So this is what I mentioned earlier in my presentation as a K-shaped recovery. So really the poorest people, the people that often have jobs that require them to leave their home in order to execute them. For example, 1 out of every 5 African-American workers, only 1 in 5, less than 1 in 5 has a remote eligible job, and less than 1 in 6 for Latinx. So there is a different reality for those who are at the lowest point of our income scale. They're actually the ones being hit hardest by the pandemic, and they are also the same populations most reliant on quality transit, most reliant on public education being delivered to their children as they go out to pick up our trash, to deliver food to us, and do all these things that enable us white collar and higher wage workers to basically stay comfortable. I think it's the least we can do as part of the Maryland family to think about how we take care of the collective so that we're all safer, we're all healthier, and that we're all able to live our best lives. I know that we just heard from a prior bill a need to tap into our rainy day fund. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, we're talking about an extra $100 or something million. And in just 1 year of simply moving the number up just slightly, ever so, for our millionaires, we're looking at recouping nearly all of that in just 1 fiscal year. So we're talking about in 5 fiscal years, near over $1 billion worth of revenue that we can not only pay back to the things that we were talking about just a couple of bills ago, but we could also put down payments on additional things that we've neglected over the years. So I would say the economic reality of this particular moment we're in is not really analogous to the Great Recession of the early 2000s.
Okay. Is there one thing that's analogous? You guys have all heard me say this before. I live close enough to West Virginia and Pennsylvania that I'm not in that great a shape, but believe me, I could jog into either state pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know very many millionaire income, but I bet you I do know a few. I bet you there are a few business people in Western Maryland that probably have a taxable income of that amount of money. Do you know of any other state that is the state of Maryland? I'm not talking about Florida or New York, where I'm talking the border states of Maryland that imposes a millionaire's tax.
Not that I'm aware of that exactly borders us. New Jersey actually did increase kind of which millionaire bracket qualifies for their millionaire tax of, it's actually double digits. I'm actually exercising restraint here at only a single digit number, 7%. And, they're not seeing any grave loss to the millionaire residency situation or any of those things. And I also want to mention, to the extent it was often said that the prior millionaire's tax was reducing or somehow moving out millionaires out of Maryland, that actually wasn't true. People's stock reality, sorry, my phone rang. So people's stocks were kind of taking them out of millionaire status temporarily, but they resumed. They didn't move.
there's no way to tell that, is there? We don't go back and we don't analyze. The comptroller doesn't tell us this many millionaires moved from Montgomery County to Fairfax County, or this many millionaires moved from Allegheny County to Mineral County, West Virginia, or this many moved from Baltimore County to York County, Pennsylvania.
Okay,
I mean,
we
I'm
got
looking at all the data. There's no data on that.
I'm pretty sure the data is you live at this address, your income was such in one taxable year, and then it was different at the same address and name. I think that's pretty much how they realized that people weren't moving, just that there was some shifting in their economic moment, but they weren't running away.
Okay.
I do believe that the delegate is suggesting that data are available that suggests exactly that the claim that all these millionaires moved was proven otherwise when finding out their incomes went down and then back up. Any further questions, Delegate Buckle?
Oh no, move unfavorable. Thank you very much.
Delegate Lutke?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Smith, thank you for the bill. As a history teacher, I can't let this one go, but reference was made earlier to somebody named Karl Marx as a 20th century philosopher. But given that he was born in the early 1800s and died in the late 1800s, that would be a 19th century philosopher.
He became famous in the 20th century.
Again, I exercised restraint at that time upon hearing that information.
So, Delegate Smith, I just want to take you through some questions quickly, because this myth of millionaire tax flight as a result of millionaire taxes is a persistent one, and we've heard it in debates in Maryland too, and it's been, I think, thoroughly debunked. But let's just hit some of these points here. Do you know which state has the highest marginal state income tax rate in the country?
Sorry, I accidentally went on mute. I do not know that. Can you help me with that?
It's California. Is that, I mean, in your experience, a place known for not having very many millionaires?
Everyone's a millionaire in California, so it feels.
And do you have any idea what range New York's highest marginal income tax rate is?
Oh, it's high. I do know that much. I don't know the exact number, but it's high.
Yeah, 8.82%, and I haven't seen a huge millionaire tax flight from Wall Street, I don't think. But I also want to say this: we've had a number of natural experiments on this issue the last few years. Did you know that Kansas, the state of Kansas, significantly decreased their highest marginal tax rate in hopes of attracting large numbers of millionaires? Had you heard that?
Yes, I did hear about that.
Did you hear how many millionaires they attracted?
It was not newsworthy.
Yeah, it was basically none. In fact, 3 of the 5 states in the country with the highest number of millionaires are states with a millionaire's tax. In fact, millionaires migrate between states at a lower rate than the general population. And economists have repeatedly debunked these theories. So I appreciate this bill. Thanks for bringing it.
No, I'm happy to do it. And I also feel like it's probably good to add that though I represent Baltimore City, and oftentimes we are discussing a lot of our economic challenges because they are acute, we also have double the millionaires based on the Business Journal of even our good friends in Prince George's County. So we do have skin in the game because we do have old money.
All right, thank you, Delegate. Any other questions for Delegate Smith? All right, seeing none, thank you, Delegate. We'll next move on to Tiffany Macy.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, go ahead.
My name is Tiffany Macy. I am a proud District 12 resident and the Administrative Secretary at Baltimore Highlands Elementary School in Baltimore County. I'm a member of the Education Support Professionals of Baltimore County, and today with MSEA, I speak on behalf of the 75,000 educators and school employees who work in Maryland's public schools, teaching and preparing our 896,837 students for their futures. I speak in support of House Bill 435, which would impose an income tax rate of 7% on net taxable income in excess of $1 million. Fixing our tax system will support significant new state investments in education and ensure that wealthy individuals are paying their share for the public services on which we all rely. Voting favorably on this bill allows for an adequate, predictable, sustainable revenue stream that will help us to provide funding for our public schools and to implement the blueprint for Maryland's future. Voting favorably will raise needed revenue, help the field of education to be competitive with other career options. Additional funding would allow for more consistent recruitment and retention of educators. In my role as an education support professional, I support the principals, the teachers, and the schools in our family, and families in our school. And when the school system has to make cuts, ESPs are often the first ones discussed for layoffs. And many of those essential individuals were the first working back in buildings during this pandemic. Underfunding means that many schools will not have their health assistant ESPs to support the work of our incredible nurses that are going back into the buildings. Underfunding has resulted in losing out on great education support professionals and teachers alike, specifically Black and Brown educators. Being one of 2 education support professionals of color in my building, I'm sensitive to this need. Underfunding means that educators that look like me are often unable to find even 5 adults that represent us in our work sites. When thinking about the social emotional needs of our students and our educators, the ability to recruit and retain educators that represent our student population is essential. Students of color need educators and SEL supports that represent them. Underfunding means that students of color miss valuable connections with educators that look like them. Underfunding means that important classroom resources such as culturally responsive literature are difficult to acquire. Educators need equitable access to culturally sustaining materials and the training to use those materials well. By voting favorably on the bill, you will raise funds from top earners that can improve the quality of life for educators and reduce the obstacles that our students face. For years, educators have been doing more with less. Voting yes is your opportunity to change this. I am thankful for Vice President Harris's reminder to dream with ambition, lead with conviction, and see ourselves in a way that others may not, simply because they've never seen it before. Please lead with conviction by voting yes on House Bill 435 to help our students achieve their ambitious dreams. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Christopher Meyer.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Christopher Meyer. I'm a research analyst at the Maryland Center on Economic Policy. I'm testifying in support of House Bill 435. The pandemic has created severe hardship for Maryland families, increased strain on public services, and at the same time reduced revenue needed to provide those services. These challenges came on top of pre-existing underinvestment in Maryland communities, things like public schools, public health, but at the same time, the wealthiest individuals have been largely spared by the economic shock, and have even seen their financial returns skyrocket. So House Bill 435 would improve Maryland's upside-down tax code by levying a 7% top income tax rate on households with at least $1 million in annual income. As the sponsor has already said, our tax code today allows the wealthiest 1% of households in Maryland to pay a smaller share of their income in state and local taxes than the rest of us do. House Bill 435 would raise all new revenue from the wealthiest 1/2 of 1%. This would also be a step in the right direction for racial equity in our tax code. So House Bill 435 would raise $140 million in fiscal year 22, more than $200 million annually in out years. This much needed revenue will allow us to protect and strengthen our investments in the foundations of thriving communities, things like public health, world-class schools. As we've seen over the past year in Maryland's revenue dynamics, asking more of wealthy families can actually cushion the fiscal impact of downturns like the current one that disproportionately hit low-wage workers. High-quality research finds that most people consider factors like good jobs, affordable housing, schools, weather, being close to their relatives, far more than tax rates when they decide where to live. And meanwhile, as Delegate Lidke pointed out, wealthy individuals move less often than other families do. They may have invested time and money in a good job, a nice house, a business, or they may be embedded in their community's civic lives. And even when wealthy individuals do move, taxes aren't among the most important motivating factors. In fact, the IRS has, over the last decade or so, dramatically increased the detailed migration data that it does release. So unfortunately, these data were not available at the time of the last millionaire's tax in Maryland. But now really detailed data from the IRS show that when states raise their top tax rates, that does not have any sort of meaningful effect on wealthy individuals' decisions about where to live. And that's reflected in analysis showing that states with the highest income tax rates have actually performed equivalently or better than those with no income tax over the past several years. So asking the wealthy to pay their share will strengthen our revenue by allowing us to invest in public services, strengthen our economy, that is, which then puts money into the pockets of the families most likely to spend it. Thanks for your consideration, and I respectfully ask for a favorable report.
Thank you very much. The next person we have signed up to testify is Roy Appletree. I'm sorry, Mr. Appletree is written testimony. So that's it for verbal testimony. Are there any questions for Ms. Macy or Mr. Meyer? All right, thank you both very much. Thank you, Delegate Smith. We'll move on to the next tax bill. We have Delegate Palakovich-Carr, House Bill 495.
Good afternoon. For the record, colleagues, I'm Delegate Julie Palakovich-Carr, here to present House Bill 495. This legislation would decouple from 3 tax provisions passed by Congress as part of the Federal CARES Act. As you recall, the CARES Act is the federal law that created the first financial stimulus program back in March. That legislation contained many worthwhile provisions to assist Americans and businesses in a time of great need. But buried in that lengthy bill were several major tax changes. Because Maryland conforms to the changes in the federal tax code, these federal changes have major repercussions for our state's finances. 3 of the CARES Act tax provisions will collectively reduce Maryland's revenues by $97.5 million over a 2-year period. This is a huge expense, and it warrants the attention and deliberation of the General Assembly. And I apologize in advance that this is a very technical and wonky tax bill, but thankfully I'm going to be joined by 3 tax experts who will be testifying after me and who can help answer questions on the specifics of this bill. But I do want to paint the big picture of why these tax breaks are problematic. To that end, some of the newspaper headlines about the tax provisions in the CARES Act are quite informative. The New York Times called it the tax break bonanza inside the economic rescue package. The Washington Post headline was, tax change in coronavirus package overwhelmingly benefits millionaires, congressional body finds. Bloomberg wrote, stealth bailout shovels millions of dollars to oil companies. And my personal favorite is the headline on ProPublica. The CARES Act sent you a $1,200 check, but gave millionaires and billionaires far more. Likely, we can all agree that the federal and state government should act to assist people and businesses who are genuinely struggling because of the pandemic. But the tax breaks included in the CARES Act were not targeted to those in need. The first tax break allows wealthy business owners to effectively zero out their personal income taxes. For instance, this provision allows someone to use their business's losses to cancel out the profits they made by investing their personal money in the stock market. According to the Congressional Joint Committee on Taxation, 82% of these benefits from the provision will go to millionaires. In other words, this is not a tax break that helps everyday Americans. It's a tax break that's reserved only for people who own a business and who have personal investment income more than $500,000. Hedge fund investors and the owners of real estate businesses are likely to be the primary beneficiaries of this change. Tax break number 2 allowed more deductions for corporate interest expenses. Only companies with at least $25 million in annual receipts can qualify for the newly expanded tax break. The main group who lobbied for this change was private equity firms. By deducting more of their expenses related to borrowing money to buy other companies, private equity firms will be able to boost their profits. It's been reported that this change may lead to more struggling businesses being acquired by private equity firms. Tax break number 3 allowed businesses to retroactively receive refunds for losses that predate the pandemic. Any company can use this tax break, even if they didn't suffer because of the pandemic. Many corporations that reported profits in 2020 benefited from this tax break. Furthermore, there are no strings attached to the provision, and the money does not need to be used for maintaining employees. In fact, some corporations cashed in their CARES Act refunds to pay for shareholder dividends. For instance, Marathon Petroleum Corporation received $411 million in CARES Act refunds and then paid out $400 million to its shareholders. Collectively, these tax provisions are not targeted to people and businesses who need support, and given their high cost, other states are decoupling. 10 states plus the District of Columbia have taken action to decouple from some or all of these CARES Act tax provisions. When you combine that with the roughly half of states that do not automatically conform with changes to the federal tax code, we have a majority of states that aren't providing these tax breaks from the CARES Act. Maryland's facing a structural deficit on the order of $1 to $2 billion a year for the foreseeable future. This bill is an opportunity to retrieve some much needed funds for the state. For those reasons, I urge the committee for a favorable report.
Thank you, Delegate. Any questions for Delegate Palakovich-Carr? All right, thank you very much, Delegate. Next, we have testifying Michael Mazeroff.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Michael Mazeroff with the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities in DC, and I appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of this bill. The bill does two things. First, it would close the loophole in Maryland's law that allows these several costly tax changes in the CARES Act that the delegate just referred to flow automatically into the state's tax law and reduce its revenue by almost $100 million in fiscal years 2020 and 2021. The bill closes that loophole going forward. That loophole occurred because no one ever anticipated that Congress would retroactively reduce taxes in a tax year other than the tax year that was already underway. And the exception that's written into Maryland law for conformity to federal tax provisions that reduce revenue by more than $5 million, the comptroller had to rule earlier this year, only applied to tax changes in the current year. So this was never anticipated that Congress would do this. It created a loophole, and the first thing that the delegates' bill would do would be close this loophole to make sure that retroactive changes don't ever flow through to Maryland the Maryland tax code again. The other thing it does, as she mentioned, is it decouples from a number of costly provisions in the CARES Act. I don't have the time to go through all of these. She actually did a much better job than my testimony would have in terms of explaining what all of them are. In my written testimony, I reference a very long paper that I wrote, basically evaluating each of these tax changes on the merit that I would refer you to. I would just point out again, as she said, that 5 states, Colorado, Georgia, Hawaii, New York, and North Carolina, have all decoupled from all of the provisions that are covered, CARES Act provisions that are covered by this bill. And as she also said, many more so-called fixed date conformity states will remain decoupled from these provisions. The final point I would make was that decoupling wasn't controversial in any of the 5 states that did decouple from all of them, because it doesn't deny any business any deduction to which it's actually entitled. It simply spreads them out over future tax years so that Maryland's budget doesn't take a concentrated hit now at the time when it can least afford it. So for all these reasons, I would urge you respectfully to give the bill a favorable report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mazeroff. Next, we have Adam Thimish.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to be here today. My name is Adam Thimish. I'm a professor of law at the University of Nebraska College of Law, where I focus my research on state and local tax matters. I have to mention at the outset that the views I express today are my own and do not necessarily represent the views of my employer. I wanted to testify today in support of the bill based upon the work that I have done for the last several years, specifically on state and local tax conformity, and thinking for the better part of the last year about conformity in the context of the pandemic. I know that time is brief and we can't get into the details, and you probably don't want to anyway. So I thought that I'd focus my comments on why the tax provisions in this bill are just qualitatively different from tax changes that you might be asked to evaluate in other bills, and why decoupling here just makes infinite sense in my mind. The first thing to note, and you've got a good overview of this already, but these tax changes federally were not really enacted as tax policy changes, but they were enacted as stimulus funding at the beginning moments of the pandemic as it was hitting the United States. And so they should really be evaluated in that light as spending. Now, we know the federal government, of course, can and should engage in debt finance stimulus in times of financial crisis, but I don't have to tell you that states operate under very different resource constraints. States are much more limited in whether and how they can respond, and decoupling effectively protects states unless and until you all as a legislature decide that this particular spending is wise and affordable. The federal tax changes, in essence, are appropriations and are best considered in that light as we think about state tax conformity. The second feature of these particular changes that's worthy of note and maybe different than others is even if states have the fiscal capacity and want to provide state tax relief as stimulus to businesses impacted by the pandemic, these provisions just don't fit that goal when you get into the nitty-gritty. The provisions are not targeted in any way towards the taxpayers most in need or impacted by the pandemic the most. Each of the reductions is based on activity or expenditures that occurred in prior years and give tax breaks indiscriminately to the individuals and businesses, regardless of whether and how they were impacted by the pandemic. They might have done well in 2020. It just doesn't matter under the terms of these tax changes. Now, it's quite obvious that giving tax breaks will help the people who get them, right? That's just basic math. But providing these tax breaks means that you have to take money from other programs. And so if states want to help businesses and individuals in need, these provisions are really a crapshoot, and states can do much better with targeted programs. The final aspect of this, and you've heard a little bit about it, that makes these provisions different is their retroactivity. This is really unique. These aren't current year revenue reductions or future year revenue reductions. These actually require states, if they conform to these changes, to go back and provide refunds from prior years out of money that's spent and been budgeted. So to that effect, these changes are particularly problematic. You see other states opting out of them. The final change in the bill to make your $5 million trigger apply to years past as well, that just makes imminent sense as well. And I think that'd be a great change. I see that my time is up, but I'm happy to answer any questions as you have them. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more person testifying in favor, Ruth Mason.
Thank you for this opportunity to testify on House Bill 495 on federal tax conformity. I'm Ruth Mason. I'm the Edwin S. Cohen Distinguished Professor of Taxation at the University of Virginia School of Law. And I'm also a founding member of Project SAFE, State Action in Fiscal Emergencies, a consortium of professors around the nation focused on providing research-backed policy recommendations for states struggling with the fiscal effects of COVID. Delegate Palakovich-Carr invited me to testify due to my academic writing on state conformity with the federal tax base. The administrative advantages of tax conformity in general are obvious. For Maryland to write its own tax law would be a monumental task, and it would create administrative burdens for taxpayers to have to comply with two vastly different income tax systems, one state and the other federal. But conformity also generates disadvantages. These include, among others, the revenue volatility stemming from the sudden and especially retroactive changes in the federal tax base. Conformity also results in a loss of state autonomy. When Maryland automatically adopts federal tax changes, Maryland reduces its ability to control state tax policy. Maryland already has lagged conformity for federal changes that would result in revenue losses for Maryland over $5 million, but this lag presently does not apply to retroactive federal changes. Thus, as I see it, House Bill 495 simply would match the treatment of retroactive federal tax changes to the treatment Maryland already provides for current federal tax changes. Ending Maryland's automatic conformity with retroactive federal tax changes puts tax authority where it belongs, into the hands of Maryland's elected representatives, who then can decide whether or not to conform with expensive retroactive federal tax changes. I might add that such decoupling is in no way unusual. As the delegate emphasized, about half of the states have so-called static conformity. They don't automatically incorporate federal changes. Although the crisis may have motivated the federal government to offer the particular relief provisions that you're considering in this bill, quite apart from whether you think that these policies are good on their merits, there are reasons for Maryland to depart from them. Specifically, the ability of the US government to deficit spend far exceeds that of Maryland or any state. In short, the federal government can afford to provide relief that Maryland simply cannot. The right way to think about this bill is that it asks the question, in a world where Maryland would not be able to fund limitless crisis relief, who should decide where Maryland's limited resources go? Maryland, the Maryland legislature, or the federal Congress? I thus urge a favorable report for this bill.
Thank you very much. We do have a question for the three of you. Delegate Wilkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much, Delegate Polakovich-Carr, for bringing this important bill. This definitely has some serious implications for us in Maryland. My question is, from what I have heard and seen in terms of the issue with this legislation, which is also impacting other states, it seems also from your testimony that part of the problem is that places or companies that weren't even necessarily impacted by the pandemic get to benefit from these tax breaks, and that even more so, some companies that actually report losses or don't even pay any taxes are actually able to further benefit as well. Can you all just expand upon that and what that implication has for us here in Maryland? For anyone who wants to respond.
I'm happy to jump in real fast here. I think the reality is that these tax changes do apply and extend benefits for losses and expenditures that occurred prior to the pandemic. And so even if you have a taxpayer who has done well in the pandemic, and one of the odd things about the pandemic as compared to other recent recessions is kind of the bimodal results here. You have some people doing extraordinarily well and some businesses doing extraordinarily well. These tax changes apply regardless of how your business has responded to the pandemic. And so as targeted stimulus funding, trying to help people who have been impacted now, these provisions don't achieve that end. They're backward looking.
And one other thing I would point out about, one of the provisions of the bill, the provision that allows pass-through businesses to use their losses to offset their investment income. That provision can very well be providing tax benefits to out-of-state pass-through business owners or Maryland residents who own interest in out-of-state pass-through business. They will get this tax break, but the business is located out of state. And so providing this tax break creates a revenue loss for the state, but can't even arguably provide any economic benefit to the state because the business is doing business out of state. So quite apart from the terrible distributional aspects of this bill that Delegate Polakovich-Carr pointed out in terms of how skewed it is to really rich hedge fund and private equity fund owners and real estate developers, it doesn't even have potentially a significant economic benefit for the state.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Wilkins. Are there any other questions for those who are in favor? Seeing none, we'll move on to the opponents on the bill. We'll start with Jim Wilhelm.
Good afternoon, everyone. Madam Chairman and the delegates. Thank you for giving me some time this afternoon. I'm with the MACPA, which is the State Society of Certified Public Accountants in Maryland, and have been practicing tax for about 30-some years now. And I think our primary concern here, why we would oppose the bill, is that it's introducing a layer of complexity that is probably not the best time for small businesses or even mid-sized businesses to have to deal with. Right now, the tax code continues to change, it seems, annually now. And to have yet another decoupling issue that businesses have to figure out and deal with and pay people like me to help them figure out and deal with is probably not productive for them, given the situation that many businesses may find themselves in right now. We've gotten used to the decoupling with depreciation and other matters, and we've all kind of adapted to that, and we kind of understand it when it's on a prospective basis, and we're kind of prepared for that. The comptroller came out with guidance in June of 2020 that indicated that because some of the impacts from the CARES Act which really just reduced limitations that were put in place from the Tax Reform Act of 2017, would be retroactive and thus not eligible or not available to be decoupled from. And so a lot of clients of CPAs around the state listened to the comptroller, filed carryback claims, and are awaiting those to be processed. And I'm sure they're counting on that cash. For businesses that are really doing well in 2020 and think they'll do well in 2021, I actually doubt that they would want to carry a loss back. Why wouldn't they use it in the current year if they're still doing well? I think the businesses that we've interacted with and my colleagues around the state who use the NOL provision, the net operating loss provision, were ones where they don't really see a near-term use for that net operating loss because they're probably going to lose money in 2020. They may have a tough 2021. And so the ability for them to monetize that loss and go back and get taxes from prior years and get that cash quickly was very helpful. So again, I think our biggest concern is just introducing more complexity into the code for small and mid-sized businesses is why the MACPA would oppose this. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have one more person signed up to testify, Mr. Andrew Griffin.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. My name is Andrew Griffin. I am here on behalf of the Maryland Chamber of Commerce and our over 5,000 member businesses and federated partners. We are here in opposition to House Bill 495. Our opposition is fairly straightforward. The CARES Act provision was designed to give financing and cash flow to companies that need it. There's been a lot of discussion about businesses that have done well in 2020 and receiving benefits from this. There are a lot of businesses that have not done well in 2020 that have also received benefits from this, particularly our mid to smaller size businesses, which make up the bulk of our business community here in Maryland. We're looking at this as a moving goalpost. There's been a lot of discussion about the concern of retroactivity. I know, and the gentleman from the CPAs could discuss this better, but a lot of businesses are asking us questions as it relates to this bill. What do they do since they've already filed their amended 2019 tax return? So there's just a lot of uncertainty there. I think it's not the intent of this committee, and it has never been to create additional uncertainty and complexity, particularly for our businesses that need the help. And so at this point in time, we just don't see how this is targeted to those that need it versus those that don't. And so for that, we would just urge an unfavorable report, and I'm happy to answer any questions I may be able to.
Thank you so much. We do have questions. We'll start with Delegate Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the testimony of Mr. Griffin, and I think I may have lost the other gentleman that spoke, but thank you. I guess either one of you could take this question, or both of you. So I understand obviously that there have been some businesses that have been struggling that are getting some form of benefit here. So I just wanted to know, do you think from the state's perspective, could it be more affordable, maybe even more efficient, just to really have targeted relief to those most struggling businesses through the CARES Act funding or some other mechanism? Could you just maybe elaborate a little bit on that?
I will take a crack at, I know some other states, there's been a discussion, a lot of other states are decoupling as it relates to some of the federal CARES Act provisions. I think the main thing that we're seeing here at the Chamber and our members are seeing, states are really addressing the way in which PPP funds are being treated and PPP funds are being taxed and how they're being spent. I think that that is an instance where it may be more targeted beyond the scope of this bill here, which again, people who, yes, may have done well, but those who certainly have not done well would be able to take advantage of what we're seeing here in this particular piece of legislation. And so I think other states are taking a look at things along those lines, but that would be the best example I could give.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just had one other small question. I believe this might be better for Mr. Is it Wilhelm? Did I pronounce that correctly? I apologize if I did not pronounce it correctly. So I do appreciate that in business and in most things in life, people appreciate predictability. But I guess I wanted to get a sense, I know you probably look to the comptroller for your profession for guidance, in general, as tax changes happen. How do you feel the delivery of some of those updates that come out of the General Assembly? Do you feel like it's communicated in ways that are helpful for you in your profession?
I would say overall, yes. I think as a tax professional, we tend to look, probably more towards the comptroller to kind of interpret law that comes from the legislative body and to help us figure out the mechanics and how to implement and all of that. Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that that wasn't a problem because, 90 days, we churn out a lot of laws on a lot of topics, and a lot of wonderful professionals like yourself or in other sectors, they do have to adapt. So I just wanted to make sure that you were getting what you needed. Should there be a change through the successful passage of this bill, that you'd get the information you needed to be able to adequately suit your clients. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Another question, Delegate Lutke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is for Mr. Griffin with the chamber. Just a quick clarification, because the bill, as I read it, essentially has two pieces to it. One is this, permanently making clear that not only are we decoupling, automatically with current year provisions, but with prior year provisions like half a year. And then the other one is the specific CARES Act provision. So the chamber's testimony is against the latter, but takes no position on the former. Am I reading that right?
On the prior years, the position on the prior years?
Right.
Yeah, and so our concern with the position on the prior years is that businesses that may have, for example, NOL look back, which is something that they were able to take advantage of as a result of CARES Act in past years, it is going to impact those past businesses. So it's to both pieces. Apologize for the confusion.
Concerned about both pieces. I mean,
yes. So apologize for the confusion.
No. I mean, my question is just then, it's been longstanding policy now, I think, that we decouple with, changes in the current year. So why does that make any difference? I mean, it seems to me that part of the bill is just a clarification.
I think it's more complexity related issues, like you heard the gentleman from the Association of CPAs deal with. And like I said, the questions we've been getting from our members is, hey, we've already taken advantage of these tax breaks, maybe on our amended 2019 tax returns. It's the unknown and the complexity. And so that's kind of where we're falling on that.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Where I guess typically we look currently and forward for decoupling. Correct.
All right. Thank you. We had another question, Delegate Feldmark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is actually just a follow-up on the previous question. So the complexity that if I understand you correctly, Mr. Griffin, the complexity that you're concerned about is the fact that the CARES Act provided this retroactive relief, and
correct,
and decoupling from that creates a problem for businesses who have already taken advantage of the retroactive relief.
Correct. And so, typically, we talk about a tax relief bill is prospective. So we talk about decoupling currently and then forward looking. Rarely do they retroactively do things.
Right.
CARES Act allowed that. So some businesses have been able to take a tax break or a deduction previously in this sense. And so they may have already paid their tax or received a tax break. In this case, then we're kind of changing the rules of the game and going back and saying, well, actually removing that, you now may have an increased tax burden from what you thought you would have for a prior year.
Right, but it's unusual that tax relief is retroactive like that. So
yes,
we
do not disagree with that.
If we prospectively coupled for future federal actions which provided retroactive relief, wouldn't that clear up the confusion?
I think we're still interested in the prospective tax relief that would be offered as well. As a result.
You don't want to be decoupled from the prospective tax relief? Is that?
Yes,
If
correct.
we is your only concern about this provision what has already happened with taxes that have already been filed and already been amended?
And for those businesses that may take advantage of this in the 2020 tax year, and looking forward as they're trying to climb out of the anemic economic situation that they're in. Yes, that is our concern.
Okay, thank you.
So both.
All right, thank you, Delegate Feldmark. If there are no other questions, we are done with the hearing on House Bill 495. Delegate Buckle, House Bill 539, which I believe we passed last year.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Madam Chair. House Bill 539, for the record, Delegate Jason Buckle. This bill, House Bill 640 of 2020, which was essentially an identical bill, passed the House and is back again in its same form. It is, I think, maybe with the exception of Delegate Lukey's venison tax credit, likely the smallest tax credit bill that the committee will probably consider this year. As you can see, it really only has a DLS estimated cost of between $35,000 to $70,000, depending upon the implications of which tax year it's claimed in. And it's a very simple bill that is supported by the Department of Natural Resources and by the historic preservation community that would allow these individuals who operate as curators, I believe is the term they use, that they take control of historical properties on DNR and state land that otherwise would fall into disrepair and that the state would have to pay to maintain. They maintain them with their own dollars and their own investments, although they do not take title, they do not own the properties, they simply live there and use them and have them available for public use and public enjoyment from time to time. And they would now be included through a statutory change in the bill to be able to take the historic revitalization tax credit from which they are now excluded under the comptroller's interpretation or definition of the law. And again, we passed the bill, I believe, unanimously last year.
Thank you, Delegate. Any questions for Delegate Buckle? Thank you, Delegate. We're done with the hearing on House Bill 539. We now have House Bill 582 from the Cecil County delegation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And for the members of the committee that have been on for a number of years, this legislation is extremely similar to what we passed a few years back for the Trade Point Atlantic project there in Baltimore County. So if you were not at the committee during that time, I'm sure you've heard press releases, et cetera, all the wonderful news that's coming out of the Baltimore County District. We seek to emulate that same language and same program on a formerly occupied naval base located in Cecil County, referred to as the Bainbridge property. There was actually a state and local consortium formed in 1999 to manage that property. And because of the significant environmental damage that was caused by the Navy, we've spent the last 20 years putting together funds and getting the Navy to put in its fair share to cover the environmental abatement of said property. We are now ready to move forward. We do have a contract that's contingent on these funds and the cleanup being checked off by MDE. And because we've been such a good actor, and because the developer has had to incur so much cost over the years, we seek to get this tax deferment on construction materials and warehouse materials. The provision does have a sunset. There is a small fiscal note that is associated with it. And this would be the first phase of industrial construction. So with that, it is a local bill. It's cross-filed in the Senate, and we've got good support over there. We're asking for local courtesy and hope us to spur some development in this long defunct and abandoned property. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Hey, Delegate Hornberger, what was the vote in the Cecil County delegation?
It was unanimous, and we also have support from the county council and the county executive.
Oh, I love that county executive. Awesome. All right, thank you. Any questions for Delegate Hornberger? All right, thank you, members. We're done with the hearing on House Bill 582. We're done with the 6 tax bills. We're moving on to 1 economic development bill, and then we'll have the 3 gaming bills. For the economic development bill is House Bill 654, Delegate Chi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, members of the Ways and Means Committee. For the record, this is Delegate Lily Chi
here to present HB 654. Thanks to the work of this committee, this bill passed both chambers last year, almost unanimously in the House. It was a 134 to 1, and so did its Senate cross-file. But the unfortunate fact was the governor vetoed the bill on the ground of the fiscal cost to the state. Well, things have changed a bit since then, right? The governor could not have foreseen how the global pandemic would have caused so much dramatic change to everything in our lives, and probably would not have known how such a program would be exactly what we need in building a strong economy around pandemic preparedness and responsiveness. In fact, just yesterday, a friend of mine who's a bioscientist called to ask me to connect him with venture funds and just sources of funding, public and private, because he got the great news that FDA told him his therapeutics in treating coronavirus disease has been recognized, accepted by FDA as one of the coronavirus acceleration treatment programs. And now he just needs some capital to get ready for phase 1B clinical study. He would have been a perfect candidate for our program. We have many such stories, whether it's development of vaccines, test kits, therapeutics. Maryland is leading the way in saving and improving lives through innovation. But we only hear stories about big corporations' successes because they have the resources and the infrastructure. In the meantime, great products and technologies die in labs. So it is our job as a state to make sure we make smart investments to leverage the great returns, both socially and economically. This program is a modest investment of just $1.3 million total to be shared by 30 companies each year. It is a state matching fund managed by TEDCO, which will fund commercially viable technology companies that have received and qualified federal SBIR grants in either phase 1 or phase 2 funding, and match up to 25% of the total grant. Because federal grants are very restrictive in what they can be used for, we need to step up our state's matching fund to cover some activities that otherwise would not qualify, but are essential in business operations. And I also want to point out, this is not a new program. In fact, about 20 other states already have such an SBIR matching program in order to be competitive in the innovation space. So it's time for Maryland to step up. Last year's bill was technology agnostic, but in light of the global pandemic, this year we decided to put in some language to say TEDCO must prioritize funding to those companies that are in the business of prevention and preparedness in response to a public health crisis. And of course, TEDCO can use its discretion in doing so. Thank you very much for your support, and I urge a favorable report.
Thank you, Delegate Chi. Any questions for Delegate Chi? All right, thank you, Delegate. We do have 2 people signed up to testify. 1 second. Start with
TEDCO.
Troy LaMelle Stovall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good seeing you again. Appreciate this. And Delegate Chi, I always appreciate your support. Greetings, Chairman Kaiser, Chairperson Kaiser, Vice Chair Washington, and the Ways and Means Committee members. My name, for the record, is Troy LaMelle Stovall, and I humbly serve as the fairly new Chief Executive Officer and Executive Director of the Maryland Technology Development Corporation, better known as TEDCO, which is dedicated to economic growth through the fostering of an inclusive entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem. Recognizing the importance of federal facilities and their potential for economic development, TEDCO has long partnered with federal laboratories to encourage the commercialization of federal research. And I should note, we just recently hired a new individual who's going to be leading our federal efforts at TEDCO. The state boasts over $15 billion in annual federal research funds, and our 4th place ranking in 2018 of SBIR funds resulted in $132.6 million in awards. To benefit from its federal position, the 2015 Augustine Commission specifically recommended that a matching grant program be created to support SBIR and STTR awardees. Additionally, the Maryland Department of Commerce's 2019 study on the small business research and technology transfer recommend the state explore the creation of an SBIR STTR matching grant program, and House Bill 654 would deliver on these recommendations. The proposed legislation not only creates an incentive for Maryland companies to seek federal funding through the SBIR STTR program by providing the matching grants to awardees, but House Bill 654 would also enable Maryland to join, as Delegate G pointed out, several other states, which includes Virginia, by the way, that offer this incentive. The additional funding provided by the legislation would foster stronger, more stable companies at their most formative stage. And I must add in closing that it's critical to note that this type of funding, this SBR, STR funds, are a key element of what we call the capital stack for early stage firms, as it allows them to access capital without any debt or dilution to their equity structure. So for all these reasons, TECO firmly supports House Bill 654 and asks for a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And one other person we have signed up is Martin Rosendale.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. I appreciate this opportunity to testify. I'm Marty Rosendale. I'm the CEO of the Maryland Technology Council. I'm here today to testify in favor of House Bill 654, the Maryland Small Business Innovation, Research and Technology Transfer Incentive Program. We've submitted written testimony. My colleague Troy LaMail-Stovall and Delegate Chi have both done an excellent job describing the bill, so I can be brief with my comments today. The Maryland Technology Council is the industry trade association representing all life science and technology companies in the state of Maryland. Fundamentally, our mission is to help our 460 members succeed and grow. Innovation and entrepreneurship in Maryland are powerful factors in economic development. In the past, you've supported the development of world-class hubs in fields like biotechnology and cybersecurity. However, as you've heard from Delegate Chi, one of the most significant challenges facing our early to mid-stage companies is access to capital. The NIH Small Business Innovation Research Grants and Small Business Technology Transfer Grants provide federal financial support for many early-stage companies in Maryland. House Bill 654 will promote the commercialization of research conducted by small businesses in the state and foster job creation by providing limited matching grants for businesses that receive SBIR and STTR grants. These matching grants are meaningful. They demonstrate state support for entrepreneurial businesses, and they're consistent with best practices, as you've heard, in 20 other states. We want to thank you for having supported a similar bill last year and ask that you provide a favorable report for House Bill 654. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you both. Any questions for either gentleman testifying? Thank you both very much. Appreciate you being here today. Thank you, Delegate Chi. To members, we're done with the hearing on House Bill 654. We next have a local bill, House Bill 530. Delegate Morgan. I saw him in the waiting room. I do see him in our Zoom. Delegate Morgan, are you there?
I'm there. Sorry about that, Madam Chair. I started speaking and forgot to turn the microphone on. So, hey, good to see everyone in the Ways and Means Committee. My pleasure to come here and pitch HB 530 to you all. It's a local bill for St. Mary's County. And basically on a current law, if you're a nonprofit, or let's say you have a small school system or school and you wanted to run a bingo for like a weekend, you have to go get a temporary license at the sheriff's office. And our county commissioners want to relieve that responsibility from the sheriff's office and move it over to another government agency that might be more appropriate to handling bingo licensing, something maybe like the treasurer's office. So that's what this bill aims to fix. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Delegate Morgan. Any questions for members? All right. Thank you, Delegate Morgan. Good seeing you.
Thank you.
All right, members, we next have House Bill 546, Delegate Hornberger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And for the record, Delegate Kevin Hornberger here on behalf of HB 546. You may remember this bill from last year if you were on the committee. This is the Video Lottery Operator Reconciliation of Proceeds, Uncollected Debts. What this bill seeks to do is attract large players in the industry. They're referred to as whales. to Maryland. Now, you may ask, well, how do we do that? Well, currently, there's only one jurisdiction in the United States that allows forgiveness of very large debts, and that is Las Vegas. And that's actually where this idea came from. The way that this bill works is that if you are given a credit line, and generally these credit lines are in excess of $500,000 or $1 million, based on your equity, your gameplay history, how frequently of a gambler you are. In Vegas currently, if you have a particularly bad day and you lose money in excess of $500,000, $250,000, the casinos have the ability to say, hey, we understand that you had a bad day. We want you to continue to come back. We know that we'll make significant amount of money in the future. We are going to forgive a portion of that debt. Okay. Now you may say to yourself, well, that's a private transaction between a casino and a player, and you're right. However, the way that the law is written currently in Maryland is that the casino would still owe the tax remittance on that forgive debt. So I want to say that over again because it is a little confusing. Even though the player has been forgiven some debt, there's no money changing hands. The way that the law is written currently in Maryland is that the casino would still have to pay to the educational trust fund or the other taxes and such for that forgiven amount. Now, that is why casinos in Maryland don't take place in this. The reason that it would be so beneficial to Maryland is because we would be the second jurisdiction, and currently those level of players are already in Maryland, or maybe they're coming to be in proximity of DC, but they don't play here. They're able to shuttle back and forth. They travel all over the world. In Vegas, the way that it works is that they want to be able to give their players other locations to play. And Maryland is a very attractive place for those players. However, because we don't have that benefit, they're not sending those players here. So this type of money we're not seeing right now. And for those of you that may be skeptical or think that this isn't a proven solution, we have added a reporting requirement. And that reporting requirement makes it so the casinos have to let us know every time that this is engaged in. And we do have a technical amendment that differs from last year. We want that report to go to Lottery and Gaming. That was at the suggestion of Bill Drafting and Lottery and Gaming. And then Lottery and Gaming would present that report to us on a yearly basis. We've also put in a sunset provision to make sure that this is in fact bringing in those larger players, and that the aggregate, there's a net positive in funds that are coming into Maryland. So with that, I know that this is a nuanced process and a novel process in terms of gaming. I'd be happy to take any questions, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Hornberger. Any questions? Delegate Ebersol.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just want to clarify, the casinos can do this if they want to. They just have to choose to absorb whatever it is they decide to forgive someone, right? It's not like it's against the law for them to do it.
Well, I actually had Lottery and Gaming look into this because some of their staff brought up a concern about what they're permitted to do. And I believe they have provided that as a letter of information. Currently, casinos are only allowed to forgive 20% of their aggregate intake for the year. And these are in the form of coupons, $20 slot play. Here's a free spin on a wheel. Here's $40 at the roulette table, or a gift card. So to answer your question, no, they are currently prohibited from doing something of this scale because of those provisions. And those provisions were set up to attract normal everyday players who might, $150, $1,000, etc. So no, we can that would violate that provision that's set in the gaming code if they were to give a forgiveness of the scale.
But 20% per customer, or 20% of their entire take for the year?
I believe it's for the entire take
not going
of
to
the year.
forgive 20% of their entire take.
Yeah, that is provided in the letter. And if you need more information, I can get to it. But to answer your question, no, they would be prohibited from a forgiveness of this size.
Thanks. And Madam Chair, you're right. I won't drill down too much. I'd like to know how this folds in with the loss carry forward, because that's another opportunity for casinos to watch for losses that they're incurring.
Mm-hmm. Did you want me to answer that, or Madam Chair?
I think that was, I was suggesting that maybe Madam Chair wouldn't want us to have a personal conversation here.
Sure.
You can obviously chat on this later, but I do see this legislation very much as a continuation of loss carry forward. As you already probably noticed, Delegate Ebersole, there's a feature of it in the sports betting bill as well.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. Look, I'm a skeptic anytime on things like this as well. And that's why there's a really stringent reporting requirement and a sunset in this bill, because frankly, I don't work in the casino industry in Vegas, but from what they're telling us, this is a way to attract larger players and to improve that aggregate of money coming in. So
a similar argument that they gave for loss carry forward. So I can't tell if it's piling on or how they're folded, but you and I should talk
right.
about that.
Yeah, and I would add to that there was no reporting requirement on loss carry. So hey, let's get it right this time.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Delegate Hornberger? If not, I'll pass the end of the hearing over to the Vice Chair, and I will see you all later. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and great to be here with everybody. So let's take our last and final bill, which is HB 553, Delegate Ebersole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and what a pleasure to have been handed off to you for this fine briefing. I come to you today with an idea that is probably not very well formed yet, and so I will say at the outset that this may be a bill that is a discussion bill, or it may need some amendment, or it may just be something that we're beginning. Maryland State Lottery is a very successful revenue generator for Maryland. At our briefing in Ways and Means, we saw not only their current success, but how innovation has spurred their growth. We are at a nexus for the possible implementation of a new type of gambling here in Maryland, sports wagering. But with that will likely come another innovation in gambling in Maryland, and that is online access to wagering. And as we generally move well into the online access age, we understand that for some forms of wagering to be viable and competitive, it'll be necessary to allow that access. State lottery is going to be someday, I believe, among them. Already 6 states have permitted and begun online sales of lottery items. Our lottery would benefit from the ability to join them. The legislation does not require online lottery. In fact, State Lottery and Gaming suggests that they may not be able to just move into selling scratch-off tickets, for example, online. They have another interest right now, and I'll talk about that at the end of the testimony, but I did want to talk about the possibilities for the future here as well. They can expand their sales. Sales, by the way, which remember with the lottery, that after overhead costs, we get all of it, not part of it like we do from other forms of gambling in the state. There is a concern that an action that was broad like this would impact sales of the very groups on which the lottery was built in its infancy: retailers, bars, liquor stores, and a few other outlets. And generally, these groups are willing to offer lottery merchandise due to 2 things. They get a percentage of the sales, 5, I believe is the current percent, and the extra business they believe it brings to their establishment. The first is true, they get 5%. The second concern may be unfounded, that they will lose business if something like this were ever instituted. Research in existing online lottery sales, the ones that in the 6 states, shows that brick and mortar sales continued increase and sometimes outperform previous increases after online sales. And there's a table in my testimony if you like to look at tables. It's a fun one to look at. Shows that they have grown. This was good research. Lottery agencies and the industry in general posit that online sales do not cannibalize current patrons. They attract new patrons, and further, these new customers access in-person sales at brick and mortar. I play a game at home and then I get to the bar and I know how to play it. I'm gonna do Keno. Now again, we're not suggesting that we open up Keno online next year, okay? The lottery has, and State Lottery and Gaming and I have spoken, and one of their primary reasons for just removing this restriction that says that they cannot sell anything online is they sell subscriptions. And right now subscriptions are sold with envelopes, stamps, and checks, okay? And they would like people to be able to buy a subscription to the lottery for the year in a way that is perhaps a little more convenient for them and encourages people who want to buy a lottery subscription to do so. This would not affect convenience stores, bars and taverns and liquor stores. And they tell me that they're not interested. Back in 2011, when all this kind of broke loose, there was a report and similar concerns were raised. And the lottery then under another director said they weren't interested. And they would like to say, trust us, we're not really ready to move forward, but trust us is a dangerous thing. And after talking to the representatives of the convenience stores and the representatives of the taverns in Maryland and several other groups, it occurs to me, and I'm having an amendment drafted that would say that for specific forms of iLottery, we could classify them. We'd work on how to do that. In other words, if it was a numbers game or if it was a big game numbers draw, that each one of those would have to be approved by statute. The lottery would come to us and say, we want you to put this in and here's how we're going to do it. And we'd have to approve of it. The bill doesn't do that now, but it would, and it would protect some of these groups that are concerned, and also would allow us time to think about, get more information on how it would impact them. I should also say that I've had several legislators express concern to me about how an expanded online lottery might impact low economic groups and groups of diversity, Black people, Hispanics, people of color. They thought perhaps they would be greater impacted and perhaps be pulled into buying more tickets. Not surprisingly, but unfortunately, there's very little research on that right now to know either way on that. And so that's another reason I think that we need to leave this in, but put in the guardrail that I suggest, so that going forward, we could begin to allow this lottery to move into, I hate to say it, everybody says it, bingo cards, right? Into the 21st century and begin to allow sales online if possible. As I said, this was a quick idea, and the people who have shared their concept with me have helped me a great deal to think about some of the protections we need to put in. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. You have several questions on this bill, Delegate Ebersol. First, Delegate Buckle.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and thank you, my friend Delegate Ebersol. You kind of answered a little bit what I was going to ask, but I want to refine a little bit more. I read Lottery and Gaming's statement, and it seems to me that this would help them without potentially hurting, and I don't want to get into a debate if it does or doesn't hurt the service stations and the bars and restaurants that have these machines. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But Lottery and Gaming is saying it will help them do these subscription tickets, which I agree. I mean, it's senseless to be doing that. You send it off through the mail like it's 1985. Could we amend the bill? Would you be amenable to that, of amending the bill to simply basically say, hey, you're allowed to have an online subscription service for the particular Mega Millions, Powerball, multi-match things that Lottery and Gaming has outlined, and then leave it up to future years to sort of take that next leap of if we're going to broader online lottery sales?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think that actually we should put in that other forms would have to be approved. It has been suggested to me, and this is not an area of expertise of mine, that the Legislative Policy Committee could perhaps approve them. We could put that in. That seems a little more loosey-goosey. I really like the idea of putting it straight in statute. We'd have to get some experts to tell us how to classify games if we wanted to put them in. In other words, if people are playing racetracks, what kind of game is that if they want to play that? But for now, yeah, I think this begins to help us to begin to think about letting the lottery have an online presence. And I think we'll become very comfortable with it after we see how it works out with sports wagering. And
okay, because I want to take into serious consideration the objections of the Licensed Beverage Association. Those
absolutely.
And
I take
at the same time, I don't want to hold up. Right, I don't want to hold up if Lottery and Gaming is saying there's a simple way that could really help us sell these subscriptions.
Right. We can, and this will get everybody thinking about it. I want to get everybody into the room, because I think going forward, the gas stations and convenience stores and taverns and liquor stores will want to weigh in if we consider going forward. And I think we might. I feel like it's inevitable, but I'm not positive that's true. But this is kind of a first step to begin thinking about. And I'd be perfectly comfortable with an amendment like that would put that very tight guardrail in right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Holmberger.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Delegate Ebersol, I also looked at expanding some other forms of gaming, and one of those was dealing with the online gaming and the sports betting and all that stuff. There's neighboring jurisdictions where you can do online poker, for example. So I'm thinking that's
iCasino as opposed to.
Right. Yeah. So I'm thinking that's pretty innocuous. I'll put in a bill this year. We can kind of piggyback that in with the sports gaming. However, when it went to bill drafting and the AG weighed in, apparently the internet is very weird when it comes to passing laws in Maryland. The AG instructed me that that would have to go to a ballot initiative. Again, for a very innocuous thing of adding on the ability to play poker online. So my question for you is, with this nexus of selling a lottery ticket or a different form of gaming online, did you get that same feedback from the AG, or is it just that they don't like me? Yeah, I don't know.
It's not that they don't like you, because no one doesn't like you, Delegate Hornberger. I know that for a fact. And everybody I've asked says they like you. And I know a lot of
that means so much. That means so much to me.
And I haven't asked Jason Buckle, I will point that out. But beyond that, I think one of the things is that lottery is viewed differently. If you'll recall, when we began to think about doing sports wagering, there was discussion about the possibility of actually doing the sports wagering through the lottery.
Yes.
That was a pass-through for that. Now, AG was a little ambivalent on that issue. And so we decided not to pursue it because, you know, suits being what they are, just because the AG says it doesn't mean you can't be sued out of that. But I think lotteries are viewed differently. As the iGaming you're talking about would probably be done with casinos. And I just think that comes out viewed differently. And I'm not sure of all the legal reasons why, but it's certainly not personal. I think it's against casinos.
Okay, great. And I support the bill, and thank you for bringing it forward.
Good. Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
Who listens to the AG anyway, man? You know. No, I'm joking.
Who is the AG?
Delegate Feldmark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair. So thank you, Delegate Ebersol, for this bill. I'm just wondering, and I don't know if you've had a chance to look at this or if there's any research that speaks to it specifically, but when we think about problem gambling and sort of the different dynamic that this would create, opening lottery to online games, have you looked at that, or do you have any sense of the different dynamic and what impact there might be, or any precautions or measures that would be helpful?
Yes, and thank you for asking. Yeah, this is one of the things, the reason I felt comfortable bringing this bill is because we looked at this pretty carefully in working on the sports wagering bill, since in fact, it's part of that bill right now, if we pass it, is to allow for online wagering on sports. There was a lot of talk about college age students and their inability to control themselves in these situations. And I think they still exist. So it's a legitimate concern. And you've heard me speak before, because we share a district where I say, I'm not a big fan of revenue from gambling, but it does exist. And there are online forums out there that people are doing where they're playing numbers games and things like that are illegal. And so also I think the lottery needs to compete with that, and that revenue needs to be captured. To that end, you know, we could put something in this as they expand, but the problem gaming fund is there. I'm sad to say that it's not being used very well, not much of it. So I think that a whole nother issue for us to talk to the agency that's working, I think it's health, that they begin to actually find better avenues to use the money. That if you listen to the casino, when they told us that they can already contribute a certain amount per machine, that money already goes into that fund. So this is an ambivalent answer. Like I said, there's not a lot of information. The only thing I will say is that they wouldn't let people I believe that we wouldn't let people just do it randomly with their credit card whenever they wanted. They would establish sort of like EasyPass, an iWallet, that they would have the money in. They could put the money into it and then use it. So it would create some sort of accounting for them to realize how much money they were, it's like when you go to a casino and you bring a certain amount of money in, you say, I'm going to lose this and no more. Hopefully they could control it, but not everybody can. And your point's well taken there.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? Delegate Hornberger and Jason Buckle. Delegate Buckle, you guys want to lower your hands for us?
Put your hands down.
Thank you. Seeing other questions, thank you, sir. We'll go to our first group of people who are going to be in support of the bill. And that is Nobody. Okay, so we're going to the unfavorables. Jack Malani.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. Jack Malani, Maryland State Licensed Beverage Association. Just wanted to go back to the history. This was put in years ago to make sure that this was done at your level. We didn't feel comfortable having it as regulation. We thought it was too important not to come back before this committee and B&T. As most of you know, I think you were briefed recently. Last year with the pandemic, they were like 0.3% down. They're already on a record-setting pace for this fiscal year. And we think a lot of that is because of the valuable partnership with the retail community. You know, there's over 4,000 folks that have lottery. Most of us put someone in the chair all day because it is somewhat of an impulse. If there's no one in the chair, some people won't ask for the ticket. So, you know, we employ people that way, a lot of entry-level employment that leads to other things, but we think it's been a great relationship over the year. I guess our biggest concern is would it reduce the brick and mortar sales, which a lot of times, as Delegate Ebersol pointed out, the commission is nice, but it's also nice for the traffic. Bringing traffic in that will purchase other items is very helpful. And I can tell you, and I think I've told Delegate Ebersol, you couldn't pick a worse time to put a bill like this in for our members. They're already stressed enough, and it's like, they're like, does it ever end? I mean, we keep hearing about we're looking out for small business, but then we deal with these type bills. So I know Delegate Ebersol personally, I know what his intent is, but he agreed that it probably wasn't the best time. I think the biggest thing for us is the unknown. I think the thing is that it is a stable income for a lot of our smaller folks, you know, where it makes up a large part of revenue. And the unknown gets us to a point where we would be very, very nervous because, as everything else, you know, once you open the gate and the horses get out, it's hard to bring them back. And I think with sports wagering, I'm not sure where you are in deciding who's going to get it and how it's going to be handled, but there's a lot of unknown. We would feel more comfortable waiting to see what the effect of sports wagering is going to be on our members and see what monies that takes out of our play. And again, you know, we've always had the great relationship, and I think both this committee and B&T has always recognized that. And I think that we would hope that at this time you would stick with us at a minimum until we're out of this pandemic and we have an opportunity to see what sports wagering does to our industry. More than happy to answer any questions, and thank you for your time. And obviously you're going to urge an unfavorable.
Thank you, sir. We'll take Kirk McCauley. No. Kirk.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Washington. Sorry, I had to find my speaker there. WMDA, I represent WMDA, which represents service stations, convenience stores in Maryland. And out of the 44 states that have lottery, Maryland is 8th per capita in spending. There's only one state ahead of us that has online gambling, and that's Georgia. The top 4 states, or 5, depending on where you rank Georgia, it's 5 or 6, depending on what site you go on, don't have online gambling. It's not necessary. They don't believe in it. Online gambling brings a lot of questions, a lot of problems. Age verification, if you're going to use a credit card online, and the plastic's easy to spend. After all, you're going to win. Why not use the plastic and use it up? And if you're setting up debit accounts to gamble with in a bank and be able to draw it out of there, that's kind of encouraging gambling. And there is a tipping point between having gambling being encouraged and offering gambling. The 4,500 Maryland lottery agents depend on lottery to make a small percentage off sales and bring foot traffic into their stores. Local lottery agents keep commission in Maryland. Lottery sales bring in customers who pay a tax on other items purchased. That in turn supports hundreds of vendors supplying their businesses. So we're not looking at one vendor support. We're looking at a lot of vendors that support that one business. Most of them are Maryland companies, and going online would just be an uncertainty what would happen. Online sales have contributed to bankruptcy of many a brick and mortar store. The state should not contribute to that trend. They should support the retailers that brought them into the dance. In the years since inception, Maryland lottery agents have added $17.3 billion to the state revenues. We urge an unfavorable vote. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We're going to go to our next speaker and the last speaker here on this bill, Ellen Valentino.
Thank you and good afternoon. My name is Ellen Valentino. I represent the Mid-Atlantic Petroleum Distributors, and it's the state association that represents convenience store owners, service stations, and very much a partner with Kirk McCauley's group. And I concur with the previous speakers. You know, there's really 3 points. You have my written testimony, but you know, the lottery has been a success, and there is a history with the law that's before you today that would be repealed. It was put in place because you did have a commissioner and the authority to move to expand and bring online lottery sales. And it's not that simple. These are games that are put online that encourage and are enticing of continuous play. And so it is known, and there is some studies out there, one that was done by the Maryland Lottery Commission, and in all fairness, it was done right before the bill, that these kind of online lottery sales do have a targeted market. And it is meant to bring on new players. And I think it's just important as you move forward with sports betting that we let that dust settle. You're right, that we see the impact on the Jack Milani establishments, on my members, and evaluate and go from there. So I hope you choose not to move forward, particularly in this year. And I do appreciate the sponsors' willingness to have an open discussion, but it is just so critical that you retain this authority. Okay, this could be, in many essence, the largest expansion of gaming if done inappropriately and out of your hands. And it's something that I think just needs a full deliberation and impact analysis. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions of these witnesses? Delegate Feldmark.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you all for your testimony. This is for anyone who wants to jump in. There was discussion about the lottery subscription service and simply allowing for the subscription process to happen online as opposed to actually playing the game online. Is that something that you would be open to, or would you object to that as well?
If I may, Mr. Vice Chair. Delegate, we had actually asked for the ability to do that when they went out for proposals on their last upgrade to the machines, because we thought that was a perfect place, especially the holidays. People come in, they're looking for something. They're looking either for scratch offs or they're looking for, you know, a bottle of bourbon or anything. And we thought if we had the ability to generate a ticket and, you know, that's what it just said, you know, we purchased a subscription for you. We're going to send the details, anything. But my understanding is that was something that was difficult to include in the last contract. We just thought point of sale, it's impulse. You know, it's a lot more apt to happen at the point of sale.
And to elaborate, I think, and Jack, tell me if I'm mistaken, as long as that subscription and that purchase starts in our store, you know, we would lose customers from coming in if you allow them to go on and purchase directly a subscription with the lottery in and of itself. But there is a road and path here that I think that can accommodate the public that starts with our locations as well. So in fairness, understand the issue, but we don't want to lose those sales, at least not this year, that's for sure.
All right. Thank you very much.
And I agree with Jack and Ellen on that point.
Thank you, Ms. McCauley. Seeing no other questions, thank you all very much. And for the members, that concludes the public hearing on House Bill 553, and that concludes the public hearing for today. With no other bills on our agenda, just as a reminder to everyone, we do have a voting session tomorrow at 11 a.m. and we have a public hearing tomorrow, Friday, tomorrow at 1:30. So any questions or anything good for the order? Cool.